Hello, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chats. Today is the 5th of October, and we are 1 week out from being at the AEA conference. I'm going to share screen. Let's do that. And I'm hoping to see all of you guys next week. If you see me, come up and say hi. And go to all the independent consulting sessions. Quick shout out for the session that I'm doing. And if anybody wants to post the sessions that they're conducting next week, please put it in the chat. My session is about, wait for it, the IC Topic Chats. I'm so unoriginal. It's on Thursday afternoon at I think 3 or 3:30. It's in one of the ballrooms. Look it up. We're going to be talking about why these IC Topic Chats are good avenues for connecting people either through your TIG or through your affiliate or anything. We've been around doing this for 3.5 years now. You can see here we have 30 people collected. We had about 70 some odd people register. That's pretty typical to get between a fourth and half of our folks joining. And so it's a wonderful way for us to connect. I think the independent consulting TIG is better for it. I know a lot of you individually are better for it because you connect through this group as networking, and you create subcontracts with one another and people make money. And I'm very happy to hear that. And I'm very happy to be part of the process for helping conduct that. We're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about contracting. And I've started to share some slides here. I think everybody can see it. Thumbs up if you can see it. See the slide's great. I'm going to be sharing a couple other things. I'm going to be pulling over into my second screen over here. So if I start talking about something and you don't see it, somebody raise their hand or shout at me. So that's fine. But we're talking about contracting. This is a core topic. We do a core topic each month, or we try to. And the core topics are topics that are kind of really important to starting your consulting practice, or something that's really important with your consulting practice. Contracting comes up all the time, and so that's why we put it in here. It seems like we do a lot of contracting in October. If you're on a kind of the federal fiscal year cycle, you'll see that a lot of, well, when the budget is approved on time, we won't go there, but a lot of new contracts get started in October. And so this is a good time for that. And that's why I like to put this in October. I do have several I need to put together. I also do subcontracts. I do MOUs, and we're going to cover all that today. So let's see, get the next slide. Big disclaimer. I was saying this before we started the recording. I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to share with you what I know from spending lots of time with lawyers, with lots of time thinking about these things. I will say my experience with contracts is that I do all the things I'm told. I have instruments that I'm going to demonstrate for you. And all of it is built around the idea of, I hope I never have to use any of these pieces in this document. We never have to go back to it. We don't end up in a lawsuit. I am currently sitting across the street from the Madison County Courthouse, which is one of the busiest courthouses for lawsuits, particularly injury lawsuits in the country. There are literal billionaires who also have offices on my street. They drive their Ferraris to work because they make lots of money. So I spend a lot of time, particularly in Madison County, Illinois, thinking about good legal instruments to protect myself in case of something happening, particularly, or I guess around injury. Hopefully we don't get too far into injury law today. But I will say, I'm just going to restate, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just going to give you my 2 cents on what I know, and we're going to crowdsource, spend some time chatting about all of this at the end. And we won't record that part for those of you who are new here. So here's a quick definition about a contract. Meant to be legally binding, governs rights and duties. I'm just going to pull out some of these phrases here. Typically involves an exchange of goods, services, money, or promises of those things to happen. And this is just a Wikipedia definition, which is, I found Wikipedia is pretty good. We have a lot of different types of contracts. So in the reference to this contract that's defined, we're talking about kind of a formal contract. There's verbal or implicit contracts. Those are nice, but it's kind of, people might say we're going to shake hands on it or something like that. If you have a verbal contract with a person, If they don't follow through on it, I don't think you have any legal recourse. So that's a lot of us have found ourselves in those situations. Perhaps a lot of you are in those situations with your evaluation. What I'm going to encourage you to do today is think about putting something in writing. Something is better than nothing, so that you have that. You may have a signed proposal, and that's kind of the next step of it. You may have a letter of agreement that somebody gives to you. We're agreeing, or which could also be an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, which is kind of a pre-contract, something that may be put together. There's formal contracts that you may give to your client, or contracts that a client gives to you. By way of the chat, who thinks, which one's better, where you give the contract to a client or you wait for a contract from your client? Where you initiate it or they initiate it? What do you guys think? I'll just look at the chat if I can find it here. We initiate, says Lily. Yeah. And the reason why, if somebody isn't prepared to give you a contract, that's actually a better situation for you, because you get to put together the terms of it. Depends on the client. Now, a lot of clients will say, hey, I want it to be my contract, particularly with a university. That's pretty typical, or a large organization. The deal with those contracts is they probably have something that's been put in place through their accounts payable, through their procurement processes. And so they want it to be on their terms. And there's really nothing wrong with that, as long as they're able to actually conduct it and get a contract done in a decent amount of time, which I won't go there because I'll get frustrated, because I do have a number of situations like that. When possible, and if it doesn't seem like your client is going to initiate a contract with you, you can initiate a contract with them. And some of those things that are advantageous around that are, if you have to go to a lawsuit, if you have a lawsuit filed, or if you need to do anything, you get to identify your home turf. So for me, it would be Madison County, which I would walk across the street to the Madison County Courthouse, versus having to go to Arizona or somewhere else. And that's actually an area where people will change your contract. And the way I look at that, I'm getting ahead of myself. If somebody wants to change the location of where a contract needs to be litigated, if they're paying you, I usually say that's fine. But if you're paying them, you should keep it in your home turf. All right. I'm way ahead of myself already. Why are we doing these? Why do we contract? Ultimately, it's a vehicle for communication. You're communicating who you are, that you intend to do good work, that you are a legal entity. You're clarifying your financial relationship. You're clarifying your deliverables. So this is in my contracts. I put all of my evaluation plan. I put my evaluation deliverables. I put my my terms for payment, and having all that laid out, it helps me sleep at night, right? I know that they've signed off on a document saying I'm going to invoice them quarterly. I'm going to invoice them on April 1st, on July 1st, October 1st, and January 1st. So that works out. It identifies you as a contractor, not an employee. And usually I have about 5 statements. We'll look at one of these contracts in a second, indicating how I'm a contractor, that I have insurance, that you can't set my hours, that you're contracting for me for deliverables, not specific detail on how you would kind of put an employee. Set start and end dates. I like to make sure I put a contract for the extent of the entire period of time. So sometimes we have 5-year, most of the times we have like a 5-year contract or a 3-year contract. That's typical for the work that I do with National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, NASA, Department of Defense contracts. My client receives a program funding for 5 years, and then I'm a subcontractor to them. And so if they have it for 5 years, I set up my contract for 5 years. And there's clauses in there saying, hey, if you don't like what we're doing, you can get out of this. This isn't hard and fast. I do have one client that likes to have a new contract every year, and it drives me bonkers, but you know, it is what you want to do, whatever it is. It sets your start and end dates. And it gives you the thing that you can go to and say, this is, when I say provides reference in this slide here, means this is what we contracted for me to do. And so when you ask me to do something that's not quote unquote in the contract, this is literally where you go to. You would look to see what you said you would do. And when they're saying, hey, can you do the survey with students? Well, I didn't contract with you to do a survey with students. I did a contract to survey your faculty. And then, I mean, you may end up doing it, but you at least have a point of reference to say, this is not what I contracted for. So in most contracts, we have a series of sections. This is just a whole laundry list of sections you could think through. I'm not going to go through every one of these. The acceptance, actually, that's usually at the very end. That's where you sign. So you want to have a signature. Force majeure. That's one we've heard of a lot lately with regards to the pandemic. That's the sort of thing where if there is something that happens outside of our control, like a pandemic, you may find yourself being able to cancel the contract. Let me just see if there's anything else that pops out at me here. There's a lot in here. Conflict of interest, that's always really good because you don't want your clients to recruit your staff away from you. That you have the authority to put together a contract. I'm just pulling these out randomly. Terms, termination, really critical there. How do you terminate the contract if you or your client want to get out of it? A typical clause is to say that with advance notice, perhaps 4 weeks, perhaps 6 weeks, whatever you think is best. You might want to terminate the contract. And usually good practice is both of you have the same amount of termination responsibilities. This is one thing I always look for when somebody gives me a contract. If they give themselves permission to terminate a contract, that they don't provide me with the same termination statements, I ask them to change it. Yeah, thanks, Vernita, on the termination. Equal rights to terminate is really critical. And that's something that people don't look for. If you were like me, when I first started getting contracts, they were 17 pages long and I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. And I kind of briefed it and I just signed it and said, I just hope nothing happens wrong here. Another piece that you will typically see, particularly when they're giving it to you, is insurance terms. And so make sure you pay attention to those because frequently I don't have the insurance they're asking for and I don't particularly need them. If I'm doing something remotely, completely from Edwardsville, if they're in another part of the country, I don't need auto insurance for when I'm going to visit them or when I'm on their campus. I've actually had to I've been required to do it anyway. And I said, well, the contract is big enough, and I guess I'll do it, but it's kind of a waste of money for me to get auto insurance for a program that I'm never going to visit. So anyway, all right, here's my contract sections. Services, that's pretty typical. That's usually the evaluation plan. I'm going to show you an actual contract in just a second. How are they paying me? Are they going to pay for my expenses or not? Are my expenses included in my is it included in my fee, or is it something else? So oftentimes my additional expenses might be if I'm traveling, they'll pay the amount of the travel expenses. What's our relationship? Oops, didn't mean to do that. Intellectual property. Oh, I'm sure people in the chat will love to talk about this. This seems to come up a lot in the independent consulting listserv. Who owns data? And usually I might even have a data sharing agreement in here too, or I'll reference it. Most of the time, almost all the time, the data are my clients, and I say, these are your data. You're giving me permission to use them. Everything that I give to you is yours. So, and when they ask me if it's okay to use the data later, I go, yeah, it's your data. I gave this to you. We're doing this work for you. Not always the case. And you may have instruments that are sensitive that you created, or perhaps intellectual property that you're paying to use. You may want to list those things there. Non-solicitation, that's where you don't want your client stealing your employees, or perhaps You might even have it in there where you can't recruit staff away from perhaps the university or organization that you're working with. Severability, how you cancel your contract, how do you modify or create a waiver for your contract? What law are we using? For me, it would be Madison County, Illinois. And the acceptance is the signatures. Okay, so let's get into some of the documents that I have pulled up. If I can find it, there it is. Let's just look at a quick MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. This is a real simple one to get us kind of warmed up. This is not perhaps it's not legally binding. I'm not really sure. Hopefully I never have to find out. It's usually a way for me to create a communication with another organization, a university. So when a university calls me up and says, hey, let's write this program proposal together, you contribute an evaluation section, and we'll put you into the proposal. And 3 months to 5 years from now, when it finally gets funded, like I like to say, my proposals usually get noted, or my universities find out whether they got funding about 2 weeks after I forgot I wrote the proposal, which is kind of ironic, but fairly true. But they put my name, our organization into the proposal, and then we're going to get funded. I usually do my evaluation planning for on spec or for free, pro bono. But I like to lay out an MOU for the purposes of saying, here's what I'm going to do, here's what you're going to do. And we will work together, but I want you to know that here's the amount that I expect you to put into your budget. That's one of the big key things that we're paying attention to. And I put that in this section here. This is just a quick, you're reaching out to me to write a proposal. You're going to send it to the National Science Foundation or something like that. We're going to do these things. You're going to do these things, including put us in as the evaluator of record. We'll be in the proposal, and you're going to agree to put a budget together for me for $20,000 a year or something like that, whatever makes sense based upon what you put together. I've had clients sign this and come back later and say, we think that budget's not right. And I mean, ultimately they can put me in for whatever they want to. We can edit it, but I pointed back to this and I said, hey, this is what you agreed to, so let's just go ahead and do that. Another reason you want to put an MOU together with somebody before you put together a contract, really important. If you're in the proposal, if the proposal is funded by the government or wherever, oftentimes the internal, if you're at a university or another large organization like it, their procurement procedures require them to put that contract out to bid. That's just a policy, irrespective of these things. I had an institution but we already worked with these people to help us write this proposal. We put together an MOU, and they used this MOU, the signed MOU, and they walked it down to their procurement department. The procurement department said, oh, okay, well, I guess we don't have to put this out for 3 bids then, since we already did this. Saved me a whole bunch of headache. It was wonderful. So that's another reason why you might want to use an MOU. And I know you guys have opinions about that. Whenever we bring this up, it's always an interesting little thing. Let me pull up some contracting topics that Gail put out there. And this is Gail Barrington. Gail Barrington did lots of these things for years. This is her worksheet number 7 from when she used to have the intermediate and advanced consulting topics. And I'm going to share all of this with you. I'll put this as soon as we stop chatting and I stop talking, and we go to the whole chat. I'll put all this into the chat box, and then we'll send this also out. Emily will take care of this when we send this out later. But different things that you could potentially put in a contract, or you might look up. So this is just definitions for you. All provided by Gail Barrington. I just happen to be smart enough to know and be around long enough to know that these things are out there. So I'm just going to share those. But what's nice here is gives you kind of the sections that you might see in a contract and some definitions or descriptions for what those might be. thank you, Gail, if you're ever watching this. I doubt it, but thank you anyway. All right, let's see. I've got a couple more things here. Here's an evaluation contract template that is pretty old, actually. It's from 2010. I mean, relatively old. I mean, some of us have been around a lot longer than that. This was one that somebody else put out there. I think I found this on the ICTIG kind of library. And I'm going to share this with everybody too. This is an actual contract you could put together. You see it's got different kinds of sections that are similar to what we've seen. I don't use this one. I'm going to show you mine in a little bit. But this is one you could use. It hits most of these things. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this now. I'm going to say this again at the end. Whatever you use, it's worth your while to let a lawyer take a look at it and make and edit it and say, oh, you probably need this, or perhaps you need to do that. But this is just another example of a contract. Obviously, at the end, you want to have signatures so that people recognize that this was put together. All right. I'm going to show you mine. This is the Goshen Client Services Agreement template. And you can tell these aren't, I haven't updated these recently because we recently went through a rebranding and we're now just Goshen Consulting. We dropped the education because we've got broader ideas here. So this is the actual template that was sent back to me from our lawyer. I sent him a copy of something that we got from somewhere else, and he edited it, and this is what we have, and I'm happy to share this with you too. What are the services? Different things about compensation and expenses, term and termination, what happens upon a termination, the fact that we're independent contractors, that I'm paying employment taxes and benefits, that I have workers' compensation coverage, something about intellectual property, warrant representations and warranties about what I intend to do and what my client would represent and warrant. Very important. I've gone back and we've had to look very carefully at this confidential information. This, because we're working with sensitive data, oftentimes we're dealing with personally identifiable information. I put in here something about confidentiality. I believe, I'm not reading it very carefully right now. I believe this is something I say in here about how all of my staff have signed a confidential agreement, confidentiality agreement internal. We also, I should probably update this. We also, most of us go through a CITI, human subjects training. I tell everybody that anyway. Non-solicitation, you're not going to hire my employees. I'm not going to hire your employees. The fact that they can't assign this, so they can't just like transfer this contract without revisiting the contract. David, we can make sure we hit into fixed price, time and materials touch contracts. I'm not actually going to talk about that, but we can talk about that during the chat. So who you are, how to contact you, how to contact the individual you're signing this with, how do we sever the contract? Where's the governing law? Oh, this was somebody else's. It would say state of Illinois right now. And then the fact that we just sign it right there. And then I usually put the scope of work somewhere else, but I usually put the scope of work before the signatures, but you put a scope of work here. In fact, I think this is the version that I updated and before my lawyer got to it, but this is decent anyway. My favorite piece, I always make sure is in here. Don't forget to put your fees, right? How are you going to charge them? When are you going to charge them? You want them to sign off on that. That's very important. All right, what else do we have here? That's it for the different documents I want to share. Let's go back to our advice for contracts. First, try not to work until the contract is finalized. How we always seem to, right? I would say good practice is if you can't go through the formal process of getting a contract finalized, whoever you're working with, get them to sign off on something. I have one client, they literally emailed me at the beginning of June saying, send us an invoice, we'll get the contract together. And I'm still waiting for that invoice to be paid and a contract to be finalized with that institution. They're forever doing that to us, drives me bonkers. I literally had kind of a little mini tirade with my staff the other day because the clients are asking us to commit like a lot of resources, and I'm like, I'm not going to commit anything until this contract is finalized. Why are they taking so long? Anyway, get it in writing. I mean, that's the big duh statement of the day. Don't forget to discuss your intellectual property. What is yours? What is theirs? Make sure that's clear. It becomes a conversation for people down the road if you don't put it in there. Yeah, think about boilerplates or your SOP, standard operating procedures. So get it together, make sure a lawyer reviews it, reference that. And then if you want to change things, change it. Just remember, you can request changes to your client's boilerplate. If the client's giving you a document that you need to sign, don't think that that's not something you can negotiate. You can negotiate their contracts. And even with the big institutions that make it sound like you can't change anything, particularly around insurance. If you're a one-person operation, you don't need workers' compensation insurance. And if you say you've got it, I don't think they're ever going to make you prove it, but they could. You might have to go buy insurance you don't need, like commercial auto insurance for when you never go see your client in person because you're doing it completely online now. Especially insurance requirements. So see, I didn't even know it was coming up. That's what I was talking about already. If you have Gail's book, see chapter 16, page 202. A lot of this is in there. And thanks for listening. That's me. Here's the topics that are coming up. We heard from Becky already on November 16th. We're going to do the rapid fire FAQs. We started a cool thing about that. There will be no session next week. We're going to be at AEA. So go to my in-person work roundtable. That'll be great. You can see the week after AEA, for all of you ICTIG folks who get excited about ICTIG and you want to go do things and change the world after a conference, that's usually what happens. We will have a session, same time, same Zoom, everything. That's going to be about how you can get active and involved. And we're going to have a bunch of ICT former leaders involved with that. So that's going to be really exciting. I said, and ICTIG leaders, ICTIG ghosts of years past. We've got 2 sessions still about the ICTIG survey, about demographics. And then we're going to have qualitative findings, which I think is the week after the rapid fire. That's Thanksgiving, but it's coming up. And then the next core topic is going to be about time tracking in November. Core topics, by the way, are usually the first week of the month, the first Thursday. And then I started a session last week or 2 weeks ago about 2 weeks ago, started a firm topic. It's like core topics, but it's for people who want to start a firm, who want to have a couple of employees or more. What are the things you need to think about? So that'll be a brand new session I'm putting together on November 9th about time, costs, and overhead, which we all recognize are a thing until you have staff, and then you realize it's the thing you need to pay a lot more attention to. So I'm going to pay some attention to it. All right, with that, I'm going to stop recording and we'll get into